My sister thinks it's funny to make jokes about my weight when she's the only one who knows I'm pregnant at her engagement party. But now her fiancé is leaving her for Cerda. I was at a point in my life when everything seemed to finally be falling into place. I was 28 years old, and after years of trying, I was pregnant with my first child. It was a strange yet wonderful feeling. My husband Daniel and I had always wanted to be parents, but it felt like destiny wasn't too eager to fulfill that wish. We spent months trying, dealing with the frustrations of each month that didn't work out, but finally, when we least expected it, the good news came. I was only 10 weeks pregnant, which, to me, meant it was still too early to tell anyone, especially my sister Renata. Renata, my 30-year-old sister, was always the kind of person who loved being the center of attention. She had a special way of making herself noticed wherever she went. She was engaged to Gustavo, her longtime boyfriend, and I knew she was eager to take the next step. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but she always seemed optimistic and excited about starting this new chapter in her life. And of course, she was planning the engagement party like it was a Hollywood event. I, on the other hand, was in the middle of my early pregnancy, feeling exhausted and, to be honest, a little out of place. The last thing I needed was to be the center of attention. I was already dealing with pregnancy symptoms, frequent nausea, body changes, and an exhaustion that seemed never-ending. My self-esteem was at an all-time low, especially because of the weight gain that seemed to be happening faster than I expected. I tried to focus on the positives, but the physical discomfort was hard to ignore. Plus, I was still trying to keep the pregnancy a secret, feeling like it wasn't the right time yet. So, I started wearing looser clothes and avoiding family events where I couldn't avoid the food, alcohol, and of course the curious questions. Renata, however, didn't seem to notice how much I was trying to hide. On the contrary, she was more focused than ever on her own engagement and party plans. She'd send links to engagement rings and talk about the party plans, even before Gustavo made any solid proposal. It was clear she wanted to be at the center of it all, and in a way, expected the world to be just as excited about her commitment. What I didn't know, though, was that this party, originally meant to be a joyful moment for Renata, would end up becoming the backdrop for a series of tensions and surprises for me. The day before the engagement party, Renata showed up at my house unannounced. I hadn't told anyone I was home, because I knew if she came and I wasn't there, she'd pressure me to attend the event. In fact, I was avoiding the plans she'd made for the party, not telling anyone about my condition. I was just trying to adjust to the change, but she, with her restless spirit, wanted to know everything that was going on in my life. When Renata walked into my house, I was so distracted by my online search for baby clothes that I didn't even notice her arrival. She watched me for a moment, then her gaze fell on the computer screen, where I had several pages of baby clothes open. She immediately made the connection and exclaimed, "You're pregnant!" It was an unexpected moment, and I didn't know how to react. I could deny it, but deep down, I knew I couldn't hide it for much longer. So, with a mix of surprise and reluctance, I confirmed, "Yes, I'm pregnant." Renata seemed genuinely happy for me, at least in those first moments. She gave me a tight hug and asked if our parents knew the news. I told her no, that I was trying to wait for the right moment to tell them, and asked her not to tell anyone yet. She agreed, but there was a spark of excitement in her eyes that I knew wouldn't stay hidden for long. Weeks passed, and the engagement party day arrived. Renata and Gustavo had invested heavily in the celebration. They rented a luxurious hall, with elegant floral arrangements and a champagne table that looked like something out of a gala. I, on the other hand, was dragging myself out of the house, once again forcing myself to fit into Renata's event, even though I wasn't feeling physically well. I chose a loose dress, something that would allow me to breathe and not make me even more uncomfortable. When I arrived at the party, I was anxious for the night to pass as quickly as possible. It was hard not to be the center of attention when your older sister was always in the spotlight. As soon as I walked into the room, I noticed everyone was excited, but I felt like a fish out of water, trying to blend in and stay in the background. The hours passed, and the atmosphere was laid back until Renata grabbed the microphone to give a short speech about Gustavo. She started with some jokes about their relationship, and, as expected, tried to ease the tension with more playful remarks. But soon, the focus shifted to me. First, she made a joke about how I helped devour all the snacks at the party. Then, with a smile on her face, she made another tasteless joke, insinuating that I was preparing to hibernate because of the weight I was gaining. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible not to notice the sarcastic tone in her words. I stood up and went to the bathroom, trying to take a deep breath and ignore what had just happened. On my way back, someone from the group, clearly inspired by Renata's words, made another joke about my weight, and at that moment I snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. With all eyes on me, not even knowing what was going on, I simply said, "I'm pregnant." And that's how everyone found out, without me planning it. The party, which was supposed to be Renata's celebration, turned into a mix of congratulations for me and an uncomfortable atmosphere that soon took over the event. Since we were kids, there's always been tension between me and Renata. Our relationship was never easy to define. It was like a game of push and pull, where, even though we loved each other, we couldn't avoid the fights. She was always the goody-goody type, the one who cared about what others thought, who wanted to fit into expectations and be the center of attention. I, on the other hand, didn't care much about that. I've always been more laid back, maybe even a bit indifferent to what people thought of me. That never sat well with Renata. She wanted to be the star, the leader, the one everyone admired, and that was always a challenge for me. When I found out I was pregnant, the last thing I wanted was to be the center of attention, especially in front of Renata. I knew she would be excited, but I also knew that in some way she would try to make it more about her than about me. The problem was that, despite everything, Renata was someone who cared a lot about others, which sometimes made her insensitive to my needs. I was in a fragile moment of my life, dealing with the beginning of my pregnancy and the physical and emotional challenges it brought. I wanted to keep it a secret for a while, maybe even wait until the first trimester passed before telling anyone. But destiny, as always, had other plans. That night, Renata showed up at my house unannounced. I was having one of those lazy afternoons where I just wanted to find comfort in my space and solitude. When I heard the knock at the door, I didn't hesitate to open it, thinking it would be a quick visit. But, as usual, Renata couldn't do anything discreetly. She came in with that smile of someone who had something important to reveal, something that was about to happen in her life, an event she had been preparing for months. Her commitment to Gustavo, which seemed imminent, was finally going to happen, and she wanted to share that moment with me, as if it was a milestone for both of us. But what happened next changed everything. While we talked about her engagement party and plans for the big day, my mind was elsewhere. I was more worried about the fact that my own plans were becoming more complicated than I had imagined. I was trying to hide my belly, but I felt like the weight was making it impossible to hide what was happening to me. While we talked, Renata walked over to my desk and accidentally glanced at the screen of my computer, where I had a tab open with some baby clothes options. Her gaze lingered just a little too long, and she quickly made the connection. "You're pregnant, aren't you?" I couldn't hide it. I knew the moment was coming, but I never imagined it would happen this way. I looked at her and, with a sigh, confirmed the truth. She seemed genuinely happy, gave me a tight hug, and started talking about how excited she was to tell our parents. In that moment, I even thought she might be more understanding, maybe even respect the fact that I wasn't ready to reveal it to the world. But, contrary to what I expected, Renata didn't know how to keep a secret. In the following weeks, the engagement party day came. I, as always, reluctant and uncomfortable with the idea of being exposed too much, still tried to find a way to protect myself. I wore a loose, comfortable dress, but something that wouldn't make me look too different. Pregnancy was making me exhausted, and I didn't want to be the center of attention, especially at Renata's party. She, on the other hand, was stunning. Her energy was at its peak, and all she wanted was to make sure everyone saw how happy she was. The party was undoubtedly a reflection of her desire to be the center of the universe at that moment. Everything seemed perfect, except for me. I was there, but my mind was somewhere else. While Renata shined at her party, I felt increasingly uncomfortable. I was trying to hide from everyone's attention, but soon I realized that Renata's engagement party wasn't going to be a simple event for her. The moment she grabbed the microphone, started telling stories about her relationship with Gustavo, and, as if she already knew what was coming, began to make jokes. The jokes about the party started light and innocent, but soon she made me the target. First, she made a joke about how I had eaten all the snacks at the party, a seemingly harmless joke. But then the tone changed. Renata started talking about my weight. Without knowing how much I was struggling with the insecurity caused by the changes in my body during pregnancy, she made a nasty joke. "Are you preparing to hibernate, Mariana?" she said, laughing, while everyone around her laughed too. I froze. I didn't know whether to stay silent or react, but I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't enough that my body was changing without me asking for it. Now my sister was making a joke out of it. I tried to keep calm and discreetly walked away to the bathroom, where I cried for a few minutes. I knew Renata hadn't meant to hurt me, but in that moment I felt extremely vulnerable. It was the last thing I needed, jokes about something so personal. I knew that at that moment I had to go back and face it all, but I wasn't ready. When I returned to the group, someone else, clearly inspired by Renata's joke, made another comment, saying that I was eating for two, as if it was something funny. I couldn't take it anymore. With my heart racing, the anger exploded inside me. That's when, out of nowhere, I revealed my pregnancy to everyone. The entire room fell silent for a moment, before congratulations started pouring in. Renata, however, was furious. She pulled me aside and, with a contorted face, accused me of stealing the spotlight from her on her engagement day. I, in turn, told her that I hadn't planned it, but I couldn't take the jokes anymore. After all, what else could I do? Revealing my pregnancy at that engagement party felt like a bomb ready to explode. The atmosphere, which had been light and lively up until that point, shifted instantly. All eyes turned to me, and the celebratory vibe turned into an awkward silence. Renata, who had been radiant just moments before, now looked angry, her face closing dramatically. Instead of celebrating the moment, she approached me with a fiery look and in a harsh tone said, "You really can't wait to be the center of attention, can you?" Those words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I was there, trying to defend myself from something that shouldn't even be happening, and she was accusing me of ruining her moment. The anger, which had been contained up until then, turned into frustration. I wasn't there to steal her spotlight, but to deal with my own reality, which I was being forced to share in such an unexpected moment. "Renata, you have to understand," I said, trying to stay calm. "The jokes about my weight weren't funny. It's not just me that's changing. I'm going through a physical and emotional process, and you shouldn't have made those kinds of comments." She stared at me with an expression that fluctuated between disbelief and disdain. She seemed to think she was the victim, that I was somehow attacking her. "I was just joking, Mariana. You didn't have to do that. Now everyone will talk about you, not about me. You ruined my engagement." I tried to keep my cool. Her words stung, but I knew I couldn't let that conversation spiral any further. I took a deep breath and said, "I didn't want this to happen. The last thing I wanted was to draw attention. But you made me feel so bad I couldn't ignore it anymore. I just reacted, Renata. I don't know what else you expected me to do." But she was unyielding. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the middle of the party. Our conversation ended there, but the consequences of our conflict spread like wildfire, quickly reaching the rest of the family. The following days were a whirlwind of messages, calls, and arguments. I tried in every way to explain to Renata that it wasn't my intention to cause all that drama, that revealing my pregnancy at that moment wasn't planned. However, she seemed more interested in fueling her anger than in trying to resolve the situation. The messages I sent were ignored or responded to with indifference, and to my surprise, she even accused me of not waiting longer to tell everyone, saying I should have done it after the party, without stealing her spotlight. With every response I gave, the gap between us seemed to grow. I knew the situation was completely out of control, but I felt that the only thing I could do was try to express my feelings, even though it wasn't enough for her. However, Renata's silence and frustration were like a wall, and I couldn't reach the other side. The tension only grew as the days passed. My mom, trying to mediate, joined the conversation. She called me every day, asking how I was and trying to understand what had happened, but Renata's words seemed to have caused deep damage. "Mariana, you know how Renata is, she feels a lot of pressure to get things right, and with this second commitment, she's afraid things won't turn out as expected," my mom said in one of our talks. But the pressure was on Renata, not me. I just wanted to be recognized for what I was going through and not be judged for something I didn't choose. I was trying to handle a whirlwind of emotions and changes in my body, and didn't need those unnecessary jokes and criticisms. As much as I tried to understand Renata's position, I also knew that she needed to understand mine. Meanwhile, rumors began to spread through the family, and I started hearing more and more comments. Some thought I had overreacted by revealing my pregnancy the way I did, while others supported me, saying Renata had gone too far with her jokes. The worst part was that everyone seemed to have a different opinion, and the divide within the family was palpable. Some people sided with Renata, thinking her party should have been the center of attention, while others thought I was simply reacting to a painful situation. Every conversation seemed to turn into a dispute where no one was willing to give in. At that moment, I began to question what was really at stake. Did Renata only see me as someone she needed to compete with? Couldn't she see beyond herself and her need to be the only one with something to celebrate? With each passing day, I felt more distant from her, and it hurt deeply. I never imagined that revealing my pregnancy would create such a huge barrier between us. But there it was, the truth. We weren't the same sisters who shared everything anymore. In one of the more heated arguments, Renata told me that if I truly cared about her, I would have waited longer to tell, that I should have understood the focus of the party was hers and not my situation. I tried to defend myself, but I realized that for her, things were being distorted. She was more concerned with her image than with what I was going through. The emotional toll was palpable. I was exhausted from trying to convince my sister to understand my perspective, while she more and more sank into her own frustration. The story I had been telling myself, that one day things would go back to normal, that one day we would have the sisterly relationship I'd always dreamed of, was dissipating. At that moment, my life and Renata's took different paths, and all I wanted was to go back to a simpler time, before words and actions drove such a wedge between us. The atmosphere between Renata and me continued to deteriorate in the following days. I knew the situation was out of control, but what scared me the most was the fact that Renata, instead of trying to fix things, seemed increasingly determined to cut all ties. She, with her view of the world, believed I had ruined everything. She claimed I hadn't handled the situation properly, that I should have waited for the right moment to tell about my pregnancy, and that, by doing so, I stole the focus from her engagement party. Despite everything that was happening, I remained firm in my position. I didn't feel I had anything to apologize for. The jokes Renata made about my body, about my weight, were unacceptable, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I had no control over the timing of my pregnancy. I didn't choose to reveal the secret that way, but the pressure of being there, hearing all that, made me react impulsively. It was as if I had been forced to react to something I couldn't control. Renata, still very angry, began distancing herself more and more. She didn't want to know about me anymore, didn't want to talk. She stopped responding to my messages and refused to speak with me. Silence was the only response I got from her. With each passing day, I realized how broken our relationship had become, and on some level, I already knew that we might never be the same again. She blamed me for something I didn't feel was my fault, and I saw her sinking into a sea of frustration, unable to see my perspective. The drama grew, and the only remedy I found was distance. The situation worsened when, a few months later, Renata announced she was engaged again. I heard from the family that she was planning another engagement party, this time with a calmer vibe, but still grand. The idea of being at her party after everything that had happened made me extremely uncomfortable. I didn't want to be the center of attention again, especially when my own sister was still angry with me. I had to protect myself, I had to put my well-being first, and at that moment, that meant not attending any more parties where the focus was on me. I distanced myself even further from Renata, now fully focused on the baby that was coming. My life was changing rapidly, and I knew the most important thing was to take care of my health, keep stress away, and not let Renata's drama affect me any longer. I needed to create a healthy environment for my child, and that meant, above all, leaving behind the family tensions that had seemed so present until then. When Renata's engagement party happened, I chose not to go. I politely told her I wasn't feeling well enough to be in an environment with so much attention on me. Renata, upon hearing my decision, was deeply hurt. Once again, she accused me of not caring about her, of not wanting to be part of her moment. I, in turn, believed I was making the right decision. I didn't want to be involved in dramas that weren't mine, and, more importantly, I didn't want to be another source of tension in Renata's life. While she prepared for her party, I focused on myself. It was the first time in a long time that I felt I was finally prioritizing my own happiness and health. I was at peace with myself, and focusing on my baby brought me a sense of calm I had never experienced before. For months, the tension between Renata and me remained the same, a heavy silence with few words exchanged. Until eventually, I realized that something important had changed within me. I had matured, and perhaps as painful as it was, the distance between us was the best thing that could happen. The story between Renata and me didn't end there, but the cycle of fights and misunderstandings seemed to come to an end. I finally understood that there was no longer any room to get involved in her dramas. There was no longer any place to try to please her or change what she thought of me. I needed to follow my own path, focus on my future, and, most importantly, on my baby. Now, with the arrival of a new phase of my life, I felt it was time to leave the past behind. It was no longer about Renata or her expectations. It was about me, my family, my baby, and the future I was creating. Meanwhile, Renata seemed to follow her own life too, each on her own path, and I finally found the peace I had been looking for.